Welcome to Poets and Poetry. I am Leona Welch, and I'm so pleased you've joined us today. The purpose of this program is to promote and kindle and encourage the writing of poetry and to kindle a finer appreciation of this creative language art with introductions to award-winning poets and their poetry. My guest today is a poet's poet in our artistic world, serving his second term as president of the Poetry Society of Texas and immediate past president of the National Federation of State Poetry Societies. Easy for me to say. Please welcome Powell Mahan. Thank you so much for bringing your poetic talent to Texoma land. We're certainly looking forward to the poetry you'll bring us today. When I was searching for a poetry group in 1995, Bud's name was given, and the person I contacted for for information about the joining of the Poetry Society of Texas. He was then also president and presented the charter of this chapter, the Texoma Poetry Society, to us in December 1995. So we are doubly thrilled to have you with us today. Okay, let's talk about Bud Mahan. A native Texan, born and raised in Westminster. Tell us about your family.
Well, I was the youngest of 4 children, have three older sisters. They were 13, 11, and 5 when I was born, so I always had 4 mothers, my own mother and my 3 sisters, so it was an interesting life. When I was very small, I was threatened because my sisters were all tall, and they threatened to put me on the rack when I was little, and told me that if I didn't get tall, I was going to be put on the rack. Of course, that didn't scare me.
Obviously at 6'6", that wasn't necessary. Okay, that's a good story. I like that. I understand you attended all 12 grades of school, public school, in the same building.
In the same building, yes.
Did you have a favorite teacher?
Well, at the almost my entire school career in that building, the superintendent was Boyce Corley, and his wife, Aurilla Corley, is just one of the great influences on my life, and I would have to say probably she was my favorite teacher. She put up with a huge amount from us poor little ignorant country kids who didn't want to read Julius Caesar or Silas Marner.
Yeah, I know. What was it like for you growing up in a small community?
I'm really grateful that I grew up in a small community, because I would have been a big fat nobody in a bigger school. And in a little bitty school, every person counted, you know. If you were on the basketball team, you were important because you were one of the few. And that's the great thing about a small school, is every single person is really important.
It really counts. You've said that you have spent time in Sherman as a young man. What are those ties?
Well, Sherman was where we came to do our special shopping. We would shop in McKinney a lot, but you know, at Christmas time we came to Sherman to do our Christmas shopping, or if there was some special event that we needed to prepare for. And of course, my mom bought lots of things at Knight's Furniture, and so you know, Sherman is a part of my childhood. Really.
That's so special. I know you earned your teacher's degree at East Texas State University. What was your major?
I was a biology physical education major for my bachelor's degree, and a guidance and counseling major for my master's degree.
Oh, I see. Okay. And what encouraged you to become a teacher?
I had a very influential teacher of biology, which really, he really got me interested in biology in high school. And I think he left the teaching profession after he left Westminster and ran a White's Auto, I believe. But he was really influential in getting me interested in biology and interested in the concept of teaching.
Teaching, oh, that's such a, where did you begin your teaching career, and how long did you teach?
I started in Richardson ISD. I did my student teaching at Lake Highlands High School, and went in my first year of teaching to West Junior High School, and 36 years later I retired from West Junior High School. I taught in the same school.
I can't imagine putting up with 36 years with kids. I love kids, but whoa, okay. I also would like to mention at this point that Mr. Mahan was a finalist for Teacher of the Year in 1996 in the Richardson School District. One of your many achievements in acting is acting in live theater. Tell us how that came about.
I was just always interested in acting, and I was just the professional auditioner, and finally got cast in something, and it seemed like once I got cast, it was just easy. I started getting parts, and
I find that so unique to come from the realm of acting to a biology teacher. That is
right.
just
and poetry from a biology teacher, right? People always think that I was an English major, but
yes. The way he writes poetry, you will think so too. Are you in any rehearsals currently?
I am about to start rehearsals for Harvey. I'm playing Judge Gaffner.
Oh, how exciting!
Harvey.
How exciting! And when will the show be?
That will be in the first 2 weeks in September, I believe, first weekends of September.
How exciting. Okay, let's talk poetry. When did you first become interested in poetry?
The first memory I have of poetry is writing poetry in college, and I think I must have been given an assignment by one of my teachers, and I remember writing at least a couple of poems for him and his rather innocuous comments on them, but, not putting me down, but, saying, that's great, thank you for trying, And I was thinking about that recently, and I thought, that line that I wrote, the rose that whispers gently is the prize. I remember writing that, and I think that must have been a truly terrible poem. So he was really kind to encourage me.
When was your first poem published?
I submitted poems to, I saw an ad in the Dallas paper, and I submitted poems to a book that was being done in conjunction with the National Endowment for the Arts through a couple of people in Dallas, and they chose one of my poems. I submitted about 4, and from that book, where they printed that poem, I went to readings and met Jack Murphy and became involved with the Poetry Society of Texas.
I see. Do you recall the title of that poem? I hate to put him on the spot.
A very angst-ridden poem called Death Descending.
Okay. Well, that's okay. I write a lot of death poems, too. Anyway, are there other poets in your family?
Not that I know of, no.
I was curious if maybe your sisters, am I right?
No.
What poet, if any, has had the greatest influence on your writing?
Well, I guess I would have to say Evelyn Corey Appleby of Henderson, who is just a contemporary of mine, and a member of the Poetry Society. But I think if anybody has influenced my writing, it's been hers and her writing, and I really can't think of anybody else that I could say that about.
She's a wonderful poet and a wonderful lady. Well, I guess that sort of kind of answers my next question was, do you have a favorite poet? So she would be right up there at the top, wouldn't
yes,
she?
Yes, she would. Right,
she would,
absolutely.
What inspires you to write poetry, and why do you write?
Well, why do I write? I write because it is the art form of all the art forms that I've tried, and I've done a lot of things. I paint, I take photographs, but poetry, I most perfectly achieve what I set out to do. And what inspires me to write is different things. I think sometimes that I force myself to write sometimes, and I sit down and wait for something. But sometimes an experience is so huge in my life that I have to write about it. The death of my sister, only about 3 years ago, I went to the Oklahoma Memorial for the first time in Oklahoma City. Didn't expect it to be one of the most overwhelming events of my life. I was so shocked at how it affected me. Wrote a lot about it, and some of that poetry has won prizes. But you might be affected by something like that, or sometimes I just force myself to think about something I want to write about,
and that's really hard.
Yes.
I think the most difficult thing for me is to write on command.
Yes.
I have a real difficult time with that. Do you write every day?
No. And every time I speak to any group in Texas where I go to speak, that is, I say, you need to write every day. But it's very hard to make myself do that when there's so many other things to do. I write it really hard at 2 times of the year. I'm writing right now because the Poetry Society of Texas contests are coming up. And I write in January when the National Federations contests are coming up. And I write for those contests. And if I did that the whole year, if I was religious about sitting down and writing every day, I would be buried in poetry. But as it is, I've run out of poems to enter at this point. They're all entered. Everything that I have that's available is entered. So
that's. I think that with most of us that write for competitions, those are the 2 major ones.
Right.
I enter some things in other contests as well too, but those are my 2 majors. I've heard some writers say that they have a particular place a favorite place that they like to go and write, and I'm wondering if maybe you do.
I write in front of my computer in my study.
Oh, do you?
And I write there because that's where the computer is.
Okay.
So, and I compose completely on the computer. My book, this book, Falling to Earth, is about my fall and being hospitalized and breaking my leg and developing blood clots and almost dying. And I wrote a lot of that in the hospital because that's where I was and I couldn't leave, So I took my little pad, which my best friend brought me, and just started. Most of these poems started in the hospital. So.
Oh, I want to tell you about this book, Falling to Earth. It's the 2005 first place winner of the Eakin Manuscript Book Publication Award. And it has some wonderful poetry in here. Also, Mr. Mahan has another winning manuscript titled Harvest. And this was awarded the Stevens Manuscript Award from the National Federation of State Poetry Societies. And he is the only poet in Texas that I know of that has won both awards in the same year. So we're really excited about these. And also in his competition, he entered both of these in the Eakin manuscript, and Harvest placed 4th in that competition. So it's a real winning book. And so anyway, those of you who are interested in his work and his poetry, you have access to phone number, email address before and after this program. So get in touch with us. I'll put you in touch with the man with the books. Okay. As poets, we write those things which have special meaning to us. Do you have favorite poems that you have written? Do you find yourself returning to favorites?
Yes, I couldn't really name any, but I found when selecting the poems to read today from the books that certain ones of them I really have trouble not reading because those are really my favorites, and some others I'll go, oh well, I won't read that one. So it's like.
They're like our children,
they are.
and we just hold them close to us.
I started to say that, but I thought, well, that wouldn't be nice because you'd be saying, well, I like some of my children better than others.
Well, and I do. I do. Well, not my real children, no, but anyway, these are like kids too. So poetry then is a big part of your daily life. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, okay. Poets write in different styles. How would you classify your style of writing?
I think I'm fairly formal, a little more formal than most people. I don't speak in common language. I like to write in a veiled language where things, I don't say the sky's blue. I tell you things so that you know the sky's blue. And that is just the way I write. And it's, you know, I'm told it's not what is current, but it's what is right for me. I write
And
the way I want to.
We have to
need
choose our own path.
Yes.
And we do. Have you ventured into other realms of writing, like perhaps a script, since you are involved with live theater?
I just haven't had time. It's right there. I want to write fiction. I want to write a play. I really do. I have started plays, but I've never gotten very far on them. And I want to write a book about the history of the Poetry Society of Texas, where some of the little backdoor things might be told. And, you know, we're slowly losing some of the little gossipy things that have happened in the past that many of our members don't know about.
That's true, and especially incoming.
Right, exactly. Yes. And Don Stodgel is one. And of course, we've lost William Barney, who was filled with stories.
Oh, yes.
And so I really, you know, it's on my list. I need to talk to Don and start writing down these stories of little conflicts and how Pat Stodgel was, you know, eliminated from the board at one point and came back to become president later. And there's wonderful, interesting stories that I'd like to tell.
And that would be so interesting. And the people that Bud is speaking about, Don and Pat Stodgel, are past presidents of the Poetry Society of Texas. Right. And Pat was also a former president of the National Federation of State Poetry Societies. And we have so few living past presidents at this time. So
right.
Many of them have passed on.
Right.
But the Poetry Society of Texas was organized in 1921 and is the oldest active poetry society still in the United States.
Right.
Okay. Do you have a particular message that you hope to convey in your poetry?
Mostly, probably hope. As I said, some of the first things I wrote, as with, you know, what I find in teenage poems is they're so angst-ridden that you just go, stop whining, I don't care. And I've tried to move to a more positive and hopeful kind of poem. And I think in Falling to Earth, that could have been a very whiny kind of, oh, I broke my leg, this is the worst thing that ever happened. But each poem tries to be uplifting and tries to see that this really is nothing. This is really nothing. And it is really connected. When I read this manuscript at Nationals, the people just came to me. I broke my arm, I broke my leg, and they really identified with the poems. And I think it's because of the positive that comes at the end, no matter what the poem is about the loss in my family, of my father and my sisters. At the end, there's hope. And
I know when the judge for this competition was Dr. Roger Platinsky of Austin College, and he said that when he was judging, there was just something about this particular manuscript that he just kept going back to. It just grabbed him. He couldn't put it aside. It just kept going back. So that speaks very favorably there too. I know you enter poetry competitions and are a winner many times over. If I were to ask, where do your poems come from, how would you reply?
Like I said, they come from my experience. Sometimes they come from forcing it. Often I write for contests. I will sit down and it has to be a villanelle, or it has to be a sonnet, or it has to be some form. And I start with the form and start thinking about what I could write about. And in other times, I'm influenced by what happens to me. The death of my sister was a great influence. I went to Israel in 1976, and unlike Oklahoma City, that experience went around and around and around in my brain for many, many years. It must have been 10 or 15 years before the first poem came.
Oh, my goodness.
So, you know, things that happen to you influence you. Sometimes I sit at the computer with no idea at all and just type phrases, or I'll think of a title. And this week I just made up a title, and a poem came from the title.
Now that's clever, because I think titles are the hardest thing for me to come with.
Right. If you don't start with the title, sometimes they're impossible, right?
I want to mention in his award-winning poetry, Bud read his bronze medal-winning poem at the 1996 Olympics in Atlanta, and it was published in an anthology, Poetry in Motion, and is included in your book, Harvest. Is that correct?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. When entering competitions, well, I'm going to skip that one because obviously you've already answered it, because I was going to ask, do you write for the subject, or do you prefer to enter poems you've already written, but you say you're out of poems right now, so you better get busy.
I have a whole lot of sonnets. I have written a lot of sonnets. So if the contest is a sonnet, I have entries for it usually. But sometimes it's a sonnet about your cat. Well, you know, I'll have to write that one because I don't have one.
He has 3 precious dogs, just precious, precious friends. There's a story about one of them. We were visiting in his home one afternoon, and he put the little guys outside, and one went over and got in a huge flower pot and made herself a bed in there, and it was just so precious, and would look at him like, guess what I did? Okay, we have mentioned this about your books, your Falling to Earth and Harvest, and I know I'm getting my copy today. I know there is another Texan, Poet Laureate Alan Berkelback, who has won both awards. But how exciting it must be to be the only person to win both state and nationals in the same year. Tell us how the collection, both these collections, I know how Falling to Earth came. Tell us how Harvest came to be.
I wanted to write a manuscript because there wasn't a theme to my poems where I could pull them together into a manuscript, and I wanted to enter a manuscript competition. Mm-hmm. And I wrote Corn. I wrote the first poem, and that is in the book, Harvest, first. Mm-hmm. And I suddenly saw this person and this life that I wrote about. And so the book is really the story of a man, and you learn about that man in the 40-something pages of his life. It's
so
kind
he's
of a biography.
creating a character?
Right.
Huh.
I started by creating a character who is essentially me, of course, living in a slightly different life than I live now. But he lives the life that I did live, which was country and planting and harvesting and those kind of things. So.
A young man of the land. I believe you have had other firsts in our poetry world. Are you the only member of the Poetry Society of Texas to have served 2 terms as president?
Yes, that's right.
The 16th and the 19th,
right.
I believe it is. And I believe I'm correct that you are the only person to serve as both state and national president at the same time?
To my knowledge, I don't know of another who has served in both capacities at the same time.
Oh, and I want to mention, too, Mr. Mahan has also been nominated for Poet Laureate of Texas, so we're very excited about that. The Poetry Society of Texas presented you with a life membership for outstanding service at the recent National Convention in San Antonio. Other achievements Others achieve this status by continuous years of membership. I would also add that Bud was awarded the highest honor presented by members of the Poetry Society of Texas with the Hilton Ross Greer Outstanding Service Award in 2000. And he is much loved and appreciated by our society. Since joining PST in 1978, is it true that you have served in every office and committee chair capacity?
Well, no, not quite. I went on the board of directors. I was a director, and then I went to vice president and president. I was never corresponding secretary, recording secretary, or thank goodness treasurer. I was never treasurer. So.
I also know that you are currently serving your second term as chair of the Student Awards program.
Yes.
And having served in that chair for 5 years, I know what a tremendous challenge it can be. Do you have any plans of giving it up in the near future? You've done so well with it. I hate to ask that question.
I have tremendous plans for giving it up. Unfortunately, nobody has plans of taking it. So I will, as long as I am able, keep this program alive because it is available to every Texas student free of charge. And I think it's a great way of encouraging the public school and private school and homeschool children of Texas to write poetry, and they can enter that poetry free of charge. And this year we're going to have a record number of contests offered.
Oh, wonderful.
And you can find that contest pretty soon. The whole brochure will be on the Poetry Society of Texas website. So
and that website is www.poetrysocietyofTexas.org. Remember that, write it down, and kiddos, get your poems going.
We would love to have poems from Grayson County. We don't get a lot from Grayson County.
And Denison used to be very, very dominant in winning.
Absolutely.
They were great high school students there. Mrs. Terry was teaching in high school in Denison at the time, and just a wonderful lady, and encouraged her students. So we hope you guys think about this now. Through the years, you've supported the Society's annual competitions with one of the largest monetary awards, plus others, as well as the student poetry program. What advice do you offer those who think their poetry isn't good enough to enter competitions?
You have to have confidence in what you've done and believe in what you've done. You pointed out that Harvest was 4th in the competition in Texas, and it won in nationals. Well, that was not the first time it had been entered. It had completely bombed in nationals several times.
Oh, really?
It had been in the Texas competition, and I had been a runner-up several times. And so you just keep trying. You have to have faith that what you have done is worthy. And I think the Poetry Society of Texas is incredibly diverse. We have all kinds of people who like all kinds of things. We don't all like the same thing. Somebody will like your poetry, somebody somewhere. And just because, like I said when I read my book, Harvest at the Nationals, I said, thank goodness we finally got a good judge. You just need the right person to read it.
Yeah. Well, and I'm fond of saying when something I have is a winning poem, oh, I'm so glad it finally found a home. You know, I'm just sick of it. Anyway. Besides the competitions of Texas and national, are you inclined to enter other contests?
No, I have entered the Pennsylvania State Poetry Society. I can't even think of another state that I've entered. I just tend to focus on those two. And one of the problems is that so many people have the same deadlines.
Yes.
Many states have our deadline. So I have, like I said, I don't even have poems left to enter in Texas, much less some other states. In our, well, and I think you probably answered this, but let's go just a bit
further. In our poetry competitions, I think we've all received the dreaded rejection slips. How does one overcome that being discouraged when they just keep coming? What do you think how do you think we might keep from being discouraged?
I think that any acknowledgement that you get at all from family, from friends, anyone who reads it and truly is touched by what you write in any possible way, that should be an encouragement to you. We have to be realistic that, we've had people join the society and are just incensed that they are not instantly recognized as the great authors of our time. I didn't come to the society that way. I came to learn and thought, oh, they're going to love me, and discovered very quickly that not everybody loved me, but that's okay, because I learned and I grew, and eventually somebody did love me. So you just keep trying, you keep growing, and you keep doing better and better and better each time you write.
Your poetry has been published in so many continuous volumes of the Book of the Year. This is an annual anthology that is published by the Poetry Society of Texas and includes all the first place poems by those poets, and there are 100 categories for you to enter, and so there's no reason for you would-be poets out there not to submit something, and that deadline is upcoming. It is August the 15th, so you still have time to write something. Contact the phone number, contact my email address. I'll be glad to get you a poetry a brochure to you. Okay, since retirement of teaching and passing both NFSPS and PST's presidency on to others, which that is upcoming, what future goals have you set for yourself?
I want to continue the things that I enjoy doing. I want to continue to act, and I do want to write much more, have much more time. I love to woodwork and garden and just continue to do all those things that make me happy.
Oh, well, I know you and your life companion have a beautiful home in Dallas, and it shows with your love of the yard and your work there. What accomplishments in your life have given you the greatest satisfaction?
I think many that you've mentioned, the recognition of my teaching by the school district, by I actually was the Teacher of the Year for Richardson for the Association of Texas Professional Educators in 2002, I believe.
Now, see, I didn't know that, so that's wonderful to learn.
And of course, winning these manuscripts contests and just achieving a college degree, which I was the first in my family to do that. Those are big accomplishments that I'm very proud of.
And I think too, with your award-winning poetry, which I see numerous judges in any number of competitions that have selected blind, the recognition of our peers is, I think, probably the most greatest reward that I would have as a poet.
Yes.
What legacy do you hope to leave for future poets?
I would have to say just my poetry. I hope my poetry is something that stays behind me, and it's something I've always thought about. I've always thought about leaving something behind, and even in my 20s I was thinking, what am I creating? I was dabbling in painting and photography and all kinds of things, and thinking, I want to leave something behind that shows I was here, and I think that my poetry has accomplished that.
It's, yes, I would think so. Again, thank you so much for your time and for allowing me to probe into your thoughts and about poets and poetry. I've learned a great deal about you today, and that's always a pleasure. My guest today has been the phenomenal and gifted poet Powell Mahan of Dallas, who has been nominated, as I mentioned, for the next Poet Laureate of Texas. If you have any questions, I've mentioned this before, and I encourage you to use the phone number or the email address before and after this program if you have any questions concerning any of our societies, our poets, or their work. I do hope you will stay with us as we go to the meeting of the Texoma Poetry Society, where Mr. Mahan will be reading from his award-winning books, Falling to Earth and Harvest. Please join us. Thank you.
I'm going to start with my book, Falling to Earth, which I just got copies of last week, finally. And this is the tree I fell from. That's on the cover. Both of these books are $10, by the way, in case you want to entertain the idea of getting one. And this is my driveway, and I put the ladder there just about where it fell when I fell. This book is about my fall from my tree in 2003. And on June the 12th, I had just gotten home from Nationals in South Dakota 2 days before, and I was going to trim this tree because the people who came by and said, "We'll trim that tree for you for $160. And I said, "Oh, no, I'll do it." I crawled up on the ladder and fell and broke my leg. And so I have wished a million times I had spent that $160. And so it begins with the poem, Falling. I don't remember falling, just the moment after impact when I failed to recognize that twist of leg as my own. Suspended against a limb too high, I hung ripe as a soft peach, vulnerable as November's brown. It would not be the same for leaves, no urgent pull of gravity, but a downward drift, a journey to be remembered. I lay in the shock of broken June, wondering at noon sun and a busy street that went on, the dull-eyed city focused on horizon, not noticing the wrong turn of my life, the shock of face, the splinter of composure. I couldn't get in my front door. In fact, I couldn't even walk. When I tried to stand, of course, stupidly, my leg was bent like this, and I fell to the ground, and I ended up crawling around my house. And my neighbor, fortunately, my neighbor just happened to be driving by, and he said, "What are you doing, looking for bugs?" And I said, "No, I've broken my leg, help me." And he drove me to the hospital. The next poem is at the hospital, and it's called Thresholds. The doctor pulls and turns my broken limb. "I cannot believe this doesn't hurt," he says. "Do you have a high threshold of pain?" I see my mother on the morning I slammed the car door on her little finger, see her unbroken face, steel resolve, as my sister drove her away, their eyes already fixed on the miles ahead of them. I'm struck by the mystery of life's repetitions, thinking of the shatter of my father's tibia as a mower hurled rock brought him down in our own front yard. He was then the age that I am now. He lay healing through a hot summer without the comforts I depend upon, lay without complaint, his face inscrutable as the voice of that flying stone. I turn my face back to the emergency room, answer yes. I have learned only as an observer until now, but in these critical hours since hitting ground, I have begun the trial of returning to what I was from where I never thought I'd be. I hold my face clenched and secret, seeing the pieces of the future start to adhere, like the cells already massing toward revival. I had never been in a hospital, much less had surgery, and so I went into surgery scared out of my wits. This is called Into the Dark. Tensed by fear of the unknown, I lie still and silent for the first surgery of my life. The operating room is stark as a blizzard, filled with sleeting discussion of vacation, while I mull the possibilities of anesthetic reaction and worst-case scenarios. The storm of voice is about Disney World. We're going in July. My cousin lives near there, and they go all the time. And then there is nothing. No voice, no snow, black. I fight to light, drugs letting my lids, the recovery room rising white as the nurse's call compelling me upward. It seems impossible, but I am here with surgery over, finished in that blink of black, my wholeness reclaimed with plates and screws. I am as a salvaged chair reglued and redone, proud of the patina in my surface, grateful for the chance to serve again. After a month of recovery, I became ill and called my sister after over 24 hours of suffering. I was thinking, well, this will pass. Whatever this thing is that I'm feeling will pass. Finally, I called my sister, and I happened to be alone at that time because Oldie was out of town. And she came and took me to the hospital. In the emergency room again. A bed of spikes breaks flesh, needles its way halfway through me. I draw air in shallow gasps, unable to reach the satisfaction of full inhalation. The curtain cubicle isolates my view, yet I hear what cannot be seen. Imagine faces for voices that rise in the urgent voice of triage. I witness the misfortune of the place, hearing through cloth the stories around me. They come and go,